We had started looking at John Gray's description of liberalism. We'll continue that. And we have been looking at his first description, or his first ingredient or essential item in a liberal ideology. And as we said, that according to this, a defining characteristic of liberalism is that it asserts the primacy or moral primacy of the person against the totalities or the collectivities. Okay, so we looked at that last time. So liberalism gives priority to the individual or groups or collectivities, state or society or family, etc. In other words, liberalism is individualistic. It gives priority to the individual when the rights and duties of the individual clashes with the rights and the duties of the larger groups. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't recognize the large groups and their existence or even their legitimacy. But the only thing is they are there to serve the individual, not the other way around. In this regard, I pointed out last time, and that wasn't a criticism of John Gray, because he might have said the same thing elsewhere. Just to say that the individual, it gives the priority to individual. Or groups, this formulation is abstract in the sense that it doesn't raise the question of which type of groups. And which type of individual. Yes, liberalism gives priority to the individual over groups, but that priority of the individual to the non-liberal collective groups, the non-liberal estate, the anti-liberal estate, the non-liberal family, anti-liberal family, or the non-liberal or anti-liberal society. Liberalism's relationship with the liberal state and liberal family and liberal society and other liberal groups is different. And similarly, as we'll see later on, liberalism doesn't give priority to any individual. It gives priority to the individual which actually believes in liberalism. So the basic distinction between the liberal individual and non-liberal or anti-liberal individual. So that's an important point. So this much we had covered last time. Now the next question is, how does liberalism obviously at this general level, operationalizes this priority of the individual over collectivities. How does it conceptualizes it? Operationalizes it. So what is the key concept which helps us understand this moral priority at this general level, as I said? And I'll suggest that the key concept is freedom. After all, liberalism is called liberalism, not individualism. And part and parcel of liberalism is belief in freedom. So, liberal conception of the individual, and the person and its moral priority of the person over groups is conceptualized and operationalized in terms of the concept of freedom. It's very important to understand the concept of freedom. After all, liberalism, liberty, or libera, that is freedom, isn't it? So liberalism literally means belief in freedom. So in a sense, liberalism is neither individualism nor anything else. First of all, it is belief in freedom. It's worship of freedom. That's why it's a bit odd that you start with describing general characteristics of liberalism, and those characteristics doesn't include the word freedom. After all, liberalism, and I'm here going to rely on Webster Dictionary. Liberalism, liber in Latin mean free. From that words liberty comes, which mean freedom. Also use libertine, liberty, one leading a dissolute life. Liberal arts, for example, basically meant education of a free man. So liber stand for used in words which function as an adjective to describe a person who is free and independent. And the contrast it with servile, slavish. Yeah. So this alone shows that liberalism, the key component of liberalism is freedom. Liberalism is a belief in the freedom of a person, and that's the central to the liberal doctrine. So freedom of the individual, freedom of the what makes individual free. We'll see about that. And two important words are freedom, free, and independent. That is not dependent on others, otherwise self-sufficient, self-determined. So these are all related concepts to this belief in freedom, the freedom of the individual and freedom in general. So freedom is absolutely central concept in liberalism because liberalism is above all belief in freedom as such. And in fact, it is debatable whether liberalism is belief in freedom or individualism, because as we will see, belief in freedom might be incompatible with individualism, at least in the long run, as we will see. So it's better to define liberalism in terms of freedom rather than individualism. Now let us look at the concept of freedom a bit more closely. So whenever we talk about freedom, just a minute. Whenever we talk about the concept of freedom, we can readily distinguish between freedom to and freedom from. So this is sometime freedom from has been described as negative freedom, because it's a freedom in the sense that it negates coercion or imposition from outside. It doesn't tell us what is going on inside. But freedom too is positive freedom, that once you are free in the negative sense, then you can do whatever you want to do or whatever you should do. Okay, so these two concepts of freedom, negative freedom, freedom too, are important. So negative freedoms are pretty prominent in liberalism because they make possible the exercise of actual freedom. So if you don't have negative freedoms, then you can't actually exercise your positive freedoms, because if you are bonded, if you are slave, or if you have to obey others, so in those matters you can't exercise your freedom. So if you want to exercise your freedom, you have to actually throw those bondages and shackles before you can exercise your positive freedom. So that's why negative freedoms are important. So negative freedoms are freedoms from. So they can be freedom from. There are two types: freedom from family. So you are protected from your family in the sense that they are not allowed to, impose their will on you beyond certain minimum necessary impositions, etc., when you're little. And similarly, society, similarly, other groups. So these are freedoms from. Belief in, so that's your negative rights come from, which asserts your right to free from coercion and imposition from others. And the second type of freedom from is the freedom from scarcity, in the sense that that's the general thing. Freedom from, you would say, nature, in the sense that scarcity of resources imposes restrictions on what we can do. So these are second sort of freedoms from. So liberalism is a belief in freedom from collectivities and freedom from nature as well, in the sense of freedom from scarcity. That's, as we will see, that binds liberalism very closely with capitalism. Now, once you have free from, then you have freedom to. And what is freedom to? Freedom to determine your own body and self. That's what we call self-determination. Liberalism is a belief in self-determination, that you have the right to determine your own will within certain limitations, obviously, but those are only contingent, necessary limitations. Contingent but necessary, yeah. This self-determination is also known as autonomy. So liberalism is a belief in the autonomy of human self. Uh, so these two concepts are very important: concept of freedom and freedom from and freedom to. Those who believe in freedom to and freedom from, those people we call liberal. Okay, so let us stop here and we'll continue with this.